I turned 48 today. No cake. No calls. Not even a lazy Facebook happy birthday from my siblings. I sat in the kitchen, lights off except for the one above the stove humming quietly. The clock ticked, slow and loud, like it was trying to remind me that time still passed, whether anyone cared or not. I poured myself a glass of cheap red wine. It wasn't even my favorite. Just something left over from a dinner I once made for people who never showed. The silence wrapped around me like an old coat, familiar, a bit heavy, but something I've gotten used to wearing. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just used to it. That's the worst kind of forgetting, you know, when you stop hoping people will remember. And then the phone rang. I let it buzz for a moment, figuring it was spam or a wrong number. But the area code made me pick up. Mr. Hughes? This is Dr. Leland from St. Joseph's. Your mother's condition has taken a critical turn. You're listed as her emergency contact. Emergency contact. That's rich. A few weeks ago, we all had dinner together, the kind that looks warm and fuzzy in family commercials. But in real life, it was anything but. Everyone chatted over each other. Football scores, mortgage rates, little Evan's piano recital. I tried to speak, to mention that my startup had landed its first big contract. It was a big deal. Years of work. Blood, sweat, and being laughed at by these very people. I barely got 3 words out before Dad turned to ask my brother about his golf swing. Stephen, my older brother, chuckled under his breath, "What kind of business again? Still playing CEO in your garage?" Nobody corrected him. I looked down at my plate. The chicken had gone cold. My hands curled into fists on my lap. No one noticed. It's always been like that. I was the quiet one. The easy kid. The one who didn't complain when I got hand-me-downs or had to share a room while Stephen had his own. They praised him for showing up to class. I got straight A's and silence. Mom used to pat my head and say, "You're strong. Don't make waves. You're not like your siblings." Back then, I thought it was a compliment. Now, it sounds like a command to disappear. There's that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I never squeaked. So, they left me dry. Sometimes I ask myself, was it me? Maybe I was forgettable. Maybe I didn't shine bright enough. Or maybe I learned to shrink because it was easier than being dismissed. I remember sitting in my car outside their house last Thanksgiving, rehearsing a story to share, something about a trip to Europe I finally afforded. But the minute I stepped in, Stephen was bragging about a new grill. Dad asked me to grab ice. I never told my story. Sometimes I hold my phone, thumb hovering over my brother's contact. Maybe just to check in. Then I hear that voice in my head, if they wanted to talk to you, they would have. Silence can be loud. Deafening even. I snapped back to the present. The doctor was still talking. ICU. Low blood pressure. Need someone here, now. He said he tried calling the others. No luck. Of course. I was the last one they thought of, but the first one they called. I didn't feel angry. Just hollow. I grabbed my keys. No rush. I wasn't going to speed through red lights for a woman who hadn't remembered my birthday in 15 years. Still, I went. Because that's what I do. I show up when they don't. The sky had turned an odd color. That washed out blue before the dark settles in. I pulled onto the highway, windshield smeared from a half-dry wiper blade. I didn't turn on music. I didn't want noise. Just the hum of tires and the occasional thought breaking through. Funny, isn't it? How I've spent my life being overlooked. And now, in crisis, I'm the one they remember. And for the first time in a long time, I was about to walk into a room where they had no choice but to notice me. By the time I pulled into the parking garage at Baylor Medical, the sky had settled into that slate-gray stillness that makes everything feel heavier than it is. It was 9:17 p.m. The air had that bite, not cold enough for snow, but sharp enough to sting. I walked through the automatic doors with my hands in my pockets and the collar of my coat turned up, not because of the weather, but because I didn't want to be seen. The nurse at the desk looked surprised when I gave her my name. "You're the first one here," she said, voice low, like it was a secret I might not want to hear. I nodded. She added, "We called the rest of the family hours ago." I didn't ask why they hadn't come. I just followed her down the hall, shoes squeaking against polished tile. The lights were too bright. The smell, sterile, lemony, and distant, it pulled something old out of my memory, something I wasn't ready for. Funny how, when you're used to being last, being first starts to feel like you've done something wrong. She led me to ICU room 4B, then left without another word. The door closed behind me with a click that sounded final. Mom was smaller than I remembered. She lay still, face pale, mouth slightly open like she was trying to speak but forgot the words. The machines hummed around her, indifferent. A half-filled water cup sat untouched on the tray beside her. The chair next to her bed was empty. Untouched. That chair told me everything. I stood there a long while, saying nothing. Remembering things I hadn't thought of in years, like the way she used to braid my hair when I was sick. She stopped doing it when I turned 10. Said, "You're too old now. Boys grow up fast." I didn't cry. Just breathed, slow and quiet. "Hey, Mom," I said, barely louder than a whisper. No answer. Just the steady beep of the monitor. It filled the silence like a metronome for a conversation no one was having. No flowers. No signs anyone had stayed with her. Not even a note. They knew she was critical, and still, no one came. Until now. The door swung open hard enough to rattle the blinds. Merrick walked in first, suit jacket still on like he'd come from a business dinner. He smelled like cologne and confidence. Celine followed, scrolling on her phone. Dad came in last, leaning on his cane more for show than need. They didn't look at me. "Doctor said we'll need to talk about next steps, end-of-life stuff," Merrick said, not even glancing my way. "She has a living will, right?" Celine asked, eyes still on the screen. "We need to figure out the house and account access." Dad grunted. "I'm still next of kin. I'll handle it." I didn't speak. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might chip a molar. My eyes stayed on the heart monitor. The rhythm. Steady. Unbothered. Merrick finally turned and gave me a look, not long, just a flicker. But something was different this time. He knew. He knew I wasn't folding like I used to. I didn't have to say it. My silence spoke louder than anything I could have thrown back. He smirked, but it didn't stick. His eyes darted away, like he'd seen something he didn't expect. They kept talking over me. Dad leaned in, voice low. "If she passes, the insurance pays out within weeks. But probate might drag." Celine sighed. "Then let's make sure her accounts aren't frozen. I'll call her bank tomorrow." I stared at them, then at Mom. She hadn't moved. "You know," I said, voice calm, "she's still here." They paused. For a second. Then went back to planning. When people don't respect you, your silence becomes their permission slip. They think I'm the same Daryl from every other Thanksgiving, every other birthday. The one who lets things slide. The one who walks out instead of speaking up. I let them believe it. As Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And they'd shown me plenty. Later, I stepped outside. The air bit harder now. I leaned against the glass wall of the hospital entrance, watching my breath fog the surface. I reached into my jacket, fingers brushing against the old leather keychain Mom gave me when I got my first apartment. Dare to be seen. I never took it off my keys. Never really understood what she meant until now. What if being seen means they lose their power? I turned, pushed through the doors, and walked back toward the ICU. This time, I didn't drag my feet. This time, I didn't carry the same silence. And when Merrick turned to block my path, I realized something had shifted, not in them, but in me. The call came on a Wednesday evening, nearly a week into Mom's hospital stay. I was in my study when my phone buzzed, Mr. Halpern, the lawyer, asking me to attend a family will discussion at the estate in Plano. His tone was measured, polite, a script. It felt like someone inviting you to step into a trap. I paused. But then I told myself, sometimes, the only way to understand a lie is to walk into it. I left my apartment, locked the door, slid into the Porsche. On the drive through quiet Dallas suburbs, the key glinted in the setting sun, a reminder that I no longer sat passive. I rehearsed what I'd say, but more than that, I braced for the silence I might break. Maybe this time they'll hear me, because I won't need to raise my voice. I arrived at the old family home. The house stood in its familiar gleam, white pillars, manicured lawn, windows dark. Inside the living room, Thaddeus sat in his usual chair, Merrick by the fireplace, Celine near the bay window. Mr. Halpern handed me a folder. "Thank you for coming," he began. Merrick nodded politely, Celine avoided my eyes. Halpern read slowly. Then he cleared his throat and announced a new clause: any property transfer will require consent of all surviving children. That clause effectively sidelines me. This was twist S5, the hidden clause. My breath caught. Thaddeus nodded. "It's only fair," he said, as though fairness were guaranteed by their power. "After all, you've been distant." I let that land. The walls felt colder. Betrayal settled in my bones. I stayed silent, watching. Merrick's lips tugged in a half-smile. He'd seen the document before. Celine's fingers tapped the chair's armrest. Halpern glanced away. I thought I wasn't absent. I was edited out. My mother promised equality once. Now that promise felt like a whispered lie. Every movement in that room spoke volumes: avoidance, tension, the weight of premeditated control. I finally spoke. "Did Mom agree to this clause?" Thaddeus hesitated, barely a flicker, but enough. Merrick jumped in. "You didn't visit enough to know her mind." My voice stayed calm. I was the only one at her bedside last week. The room froze. Even Halpern's pen paused mid-sentence. Then Halpern placed a second document before us, an unsigned amendment Mom had drafted to restore my share before falling ill. That was twist S6, the disinheritance reveal. Though unsigned, her intention was clear. The truth stood naked between us. My pulse pounded. Betrayal warred with relief. They had tried to erase me, but evidence remained. Merrick flung his chair back and stalked toward the hall. Celine followed in silence. Thaddeus muttered, "You always make things difficult, son." I stood firm. Maybe difficult is what it takes to be heard. I left the room without turning back, my steps echoing down the corridor. I felt their eyes behind my back, but I didn't falter. As I climbed into the car, I thought, they built walls out of inheritance papers. I'll build doors out of proof. Tonight, I would go to the safety deposit box, the place Mom once whispered guarded things she couldn't speak aloud. The drive away was cool, steady, sure. I was no longer the boy who shrank. I was the man who would make them listen. The wheels turned slow but steady as I neared the house again, this time not for a confrontation, not for a meeting. Just presence. Just to be seen. For the first time in years, I was pulling into that driveway behind the wheel of something that wasn't borrowed, begged, or beaten down. I remembered being 16, asking Merrick if I could just ride in his Mustang. He laughed. Told me, people like you don't belong in leather seats. That memory clung like the humid Texas dust that now settled across the yard. My headlights cut through it, crisp and deliberate. No music, no engine rev, just the low, confident hum of control. I sat for a second before turning off the ignition. Not about sightseeing. It's about being seen. The front door cracked open before I even got out. Merrick stepped out first, drink in hand like he'd been waiting. Celine followed, arms crossed. They expected me, maybe even expected a scene, but not this. Not the car. Not the stance. My mother pushed the screen open and took one step out. Her hand gripped the frame. For a second, her eyes widened. No words came. Father trailed behind, slower, his gaze avoiding mine. I took my time opening the door, stepping out, locking the car with a soft click that broke the silence. I leaned against the driver's side, arms crossed. You called this your family home, I said, my eyes locked on them. I called it exile. None of them responded. But they didn't look away either. That car, it wasn't just paint and wheels. It was everything I was told I couldn't be. It said what I didn't have to. Inside, I placed my keys on the foyer table like I'd always seen Thaddeus do. The sound echoed sharper than I remembered. Merrick muttered, "Nice car. Must have slaved over that." I didn't bite. It's not about slaving, I said, still facing the room. It's about earning. No one laughed. Not even a smirk. The weight of something unfamiliar hung in the space. Maybe respect. Maybe just discomfort. Mother stepped closer, her voice delicate. Well, it's good you finally, she paused, searching. Doc could afford something like that. I caught it. She hadn't said could. She said finally. That one word cracked open years of silence. Finally, as if she never expected it. As if I'd never been enough until now. It wasn't about the car. It was about what she thought I wasn't. I turned, eyes steady. I counted every rejection so this moment would count. She looked down. I moved toward the back of the house, passing portraits that had hung there longer than I'd been gone. One photo caught me. It was the family, early 2000s. No sign of me. Not cropped, just never there. I stood still for a second, then said, almost to myself, it's not a show. It's a statement. I walked back outside, the air cooler now. The engine purred to life as I backed out slowly. No screech. Just presence. As I pulled away, I left my headlights on for a moment longer, casting light across their front lawn, not to see them, but to remind them I was there. If they only remember my car, I thought, they still hadn't seen me before. The morning sun didn't ease in that day. It sliced. Sharp lines through my blinds, across the floor, right up my chest. I sat still, staring at the small brass key resting in my palm. It had been taped inside a greeting card from my mother years ago. Only if it's an emergency, she'd said. At the time, I thought she meant a flat tire or lost wallet. Now, it meant something different. The bank was nearly empty, just the hum of overhead lights and the shuffle of a lone security guard. The box hadn't been touched in years, dust clung to its edges like time refusing to move. When I opened it, I didn't find cash or bonds. Just a few old photographs, her worn Bible, and a single sealed envelope. On the front, her handwriting, only if I can't speak for myself. I held it for a moment. Heavy for paper. Heavier for what it meant. Then I whispered, "Okay, Mom. Talk to me," and broke the seal. Inside the envelope was a draft, typed, signed, notarized, but never filed. A will amendment. Clear language, equal distribution, full decision-making authority to all children, including me. A letter to Mr. Halpern sat beneath it, dated 4 days before her stroke. The edges of the page trembled in my hand. She'd tried. She had meant to correct what they erased. A quiet rebellion, made in private, meant for a future she never got to see. I thought about every moment I doubted her. Every silence I mistook for agreement. And here she was, in legal ink, saying she saw me. Had always seen me. But it wasn't just documents in that envelope. There was a small flash drive taped to the corner. I walked back to my car and slid it into my laptop. No folder, just one audio file. I clicked. Her voice came through, shaky but deliberate. "If you're hearing this," she said, "I wasn't strong enough to change it in time. But I saw you, Daryl. I always saw you." My breath caught. "I let them shape too much," she continued. "Your father Merrick, they told me silence kept peace. But it wasn't peace. It was fear." She paused. I heard her exhale, like she was holding back a sob. "I was proud of you. You kept your kindness. That was never weakness. That was strength. Don't let them take your name, son." I don't remember crying. But I do remember gripping the steering wheel as if it could hold me together. It wasn't grief that broke me. It was clarity. She had always been there, just not loud enough for the others to hear. I called Mr. Halpern from the car. He answered on the second ring. When I told him what I found, there was silence. "Can I see it?" he finally asked. Later that afternoon, we met at his office. He held the paper in gloved hands, scanning slowly. "It's her signature," he said. "And notarized. But it was never filed. What happens if I make it public?" He hesitated. "It could influence interpretation. Especially if it comes with that recording." I nodded but didn't respond. I wasn't rushing this. Not anymore. Let them play their hand. Mine was just warming up. That night, I uploaded copies of everything. Cloud storage, backup drive, separate attorney. No loose ends. Later, I drove out to the lake behind Mom's old church. The same spot she took me fishing once, when I was 7. I lit a small candle by the edge. Pulled out a photo, her holding me in one arm, a juice box in the other. "You did speak, Mom," I said. "I heard you." I let the flame flicker until it died on its own. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. She'd handed me the key, not just to the box, but to the truth they buried. I woke early, just before dawn. The sky was still bruised with dark. My heart pounded, as if it knew today would change everything. I reread the amendment draft, her handwriting, the ink still crisp, and listened once more to her recording. Every ignored milestone, every silent dismissal, burned fresh again. I gathered copies, organized the files, backed them up. I loaded the recording into secure storage. I rehearsed what I would say if I had to. Silence no longer served me, they forced my silence, but now I'd forced them to hear. I drove to Bram Kessler's office, the city waking around me. The meeting room held his leather chair and serious eyes. I placed the draft, the recording, and backup files on his desk. He flipped through them, his face stiffening. "These are legitimate," he said quietly. Then he warned me, releasing them could bring backlash, legal counters, smear campaigns. I leaned forward. "If they've gaslit me publicly, I'll let sunlight expose everything." He hesitated just before agreeing to represent me. Then I laid out an additional piece, Twist S12, the contract exposing Merrick's misuse of assets tied to my name. He stiffened again, realizing how deep the water ran. That evening, the estate's dining room felt heavy. Bram accompanied me as I walked in. My siblings and father sat at a long table. I placed the contract in the middle. Silence froze lips. I said nothing at first, let them collect their shock. Then I read aloud, properties once registered under my name had been diverted. Leased, sold, transferred, without my consent. All while I remained silent. Then I announced my final move, Twist S13, the final withdrawal. I withdrew all guarantees, demanded immediate reversal of assets, or I would file suit publicly. The room crackled, voices died midair. Merrick looked pale, Celine stared at the floor. Father's jaw clenched. I didn't wait for them to recover. I sat. Anger flared, Merrick erupted, "You betrayed us," he shouted. Father faltered, trying to muster authority. Celine's voice trembled. Are you doing this for attention or justice? I answered softly, I'm doing it for truth. Bram intervened, reminding them that the evidence held legal weight. The air felt like broken glass, shards of pride, regret, fear. The energy buzzed, confrontation sting, exposed lies, power shifting. When voices faded, I slipped outside into the garden under moonlight. I replayed their reactions, the tremor in Celine's voice. Merrick's falling gaze. Father's flinch. I planned next steps, hold off public release until they try to vilify me. I sent encrypted copies to trusted friends, journalists I could rely on. I held one thought steady, if they swing back, I'll let the world watch them swing in vain. Night wind brushed past. I stood still, ready. Twilight stretched across my windshield as I pulled into my driveway. That kind of evening where you feel watched, even when you're alone. The message came in just after sunset, no name, no number. Just 7 words, he was in the safe deposit room. My fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't need to guess who he was. Part of me knew it might be bait. But I didn't care. There was something about silence that always screamed the loudest, and tonight, I was done pretending not to hear it. On the drive, my phone buzzed again. Celine. I let it ring out. I'd given her too many chances to speak, and she'd spent every one in silence. I drove with purpose. No music. Just the hum of the road and my thoughts, sharp and steady. One thing was clear, I wasn't showing up to be polite. By the time I reached the estate, night had settled in like a secret. I parked off to the side and cut the lights. The front gate clicked shut behind me without a sound. I moved through the side corridor toward the study. Light spilled beneath the door. Voices low, strained. I stepped closer, breath still. That you think no one saw, Merrick? I was there. I saw you take them, a voice hissed. Familiar. Worn but fierce. Rowena. My aunt. She hadn't been to a family gathering in years, not since the settlement talks fell apart after Mom's first stroke. What was she doing here? Merrick's tone rose, full of artificial calm. Rowena, that's not what happened. You misunderstood. No, I didn't, she cut him off. You were rifling through your mother's things like they were yours. And you knew Daryl was listed in that envelope. I pushed open the door. Merrick turned sharply, eyes widening. Rowena stepped back but didn't flinch. Well, Merrick smirked, smoothing his collar, look who the storm dragged in. I kept my eyes on Rowena. You saw him with the documents? She nodded once, jaw tight. He was trying to remove something from the envelope. I stopped him. Merrick scoffed. Daryl, come on. You really buying into this ghost story? He turned to Rowena, suddenly condescending. You've had issues with memory lately, haven't you? You told me yourself last year. You're lying, she snapped. I stepped between them. I don't chase ghosts. I chase facts. You've left enough fingerprints behind, Merrick. He laughed. Short. Hollow. You're just trying to stir chaos because you don't like where you rank in the family line. I'm not interested in your hierarchy, I said, voice steady. I'm interested in truth. The kind that doesn't shift based on who's got the most to lose. Just then, the hallway filled with footsteps. Father appeared first, followed by Celine, then Aunt Clara. One by one, like summoned spirits. What's going on here? My father demanded. Rowena turned, voice cracking but clear. Merrick tried to hide an amendment, one that favored Daryl. Merrick rolled his eyes. She's confused. She's not, I said. She's just not scared of you anymore. He stepped forward, his voice low. Don't confuse fantasy with loyalty. I didn't blink. Don't confuse silence with surrender. Celine shifted, looked away. Merrick looked to our father for support. He got none. Enough, my father muttered. But it was too late. Everyone had heard. I turned to Rowena. You don't need to explain. Just rest. Her lip trembled. I never meant to stay quiet this long. I nodded. You're not the only one. She stepped back into the hallway, wiping her eyes. Merrick stayed frozen, cornered by truth. No lawyer in the world could redact that look on his face. I walked out, leaving the door ajar behind me. The air outside was colder than before, like it had shed something heavy. I stopped at the edge of the porch and let out a slow breath. They might silence Rowena. They might try to discredit her. But I had the recordings. The signatures. The timeline. The evidence no one else could edit. Next time, I wasn't going in alone. I'd bring the world with me. I'm seated at my home office, 7 p.m., lights dim to a soft glow. The laptop screen glows with an evening news bulletin, the local station teasing exclusive family revelations. My heart picks up pace. This isn't coincidence. They've been preparing a narrative. I scroll through the clip snippet they've posted, heavily edited, missing context, built to elicit shock. My jaw tightens. They think they can control the narrative. But full story? Full story is coming tonight. At exactly 8 p.m. I hit publish on the podcast. Bram's voice guides the flow, the draft, the recording, Rowena's testimony, every document laid bare. I narrate in my own voice, calm but firm, telling truth the way it happened, the betrayal, the manipulation, the twisted loyalties. I describe how they used formality as a weapon. I mention places, dates, names. Local media pick it up almost instantly, begins broadcasting excerpts. Text alerts light up phones. Callers ask, who is this Dare Boone? The podcast becomes a lightning strike across the quiet streets of my hometown. That's Twist S11, the podcast reveal. Suddenly, people are no longer asking whether the story is true, they're asking how they missed it in the first place. At 9 p.m., the viral moment arrives. A 30-second clip of Mom's voice, I saw you, Daryl. It spreads on social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and within minutes local newscasts are replaying it. Comments flood in, who is this man? This changes everything. That voice, that was her. That tiny clip becomes a hammer. That moment is Twist S18, the viral clip. Validation, vindication, heartbreak, all rolled into a single audio pulse that rattles their constructed silence. Within minutes, Merrick demands a press conference. The family is a united front. He leans into the camera, voice measured, this was always a private matter made public. Celine reads a prepared statement. They try to control spin, to cast me as desperate, unstable. I watch the live feed from my living room. Comments in real time, people siding with me, calling out hypocrisy, demanding integrity. I post a reply, truth doesn't fear exposure. That flips something. A power shift happens not behind closed doors, but in full view. I head to the park, the one behind Mom's childhood church, where I once walked with her. Headphones on, I listen to that viral clip again. Tears slip, but I ground myself. This is not vengeance. It's accountability. I whisper to myself, they demanded attention. I gave them the truth. I decide the next step, I'll launch a foundation in her name, rooted in her beliefs, to protect those who cannot speak, to defend legacy from erasure. Midnight comes. My phone chimes, anonymous message, you just unleashed a lion's roar. Are you ready? Early morning mist hugged the lake, and the wind carried the scent of dry leaves across the water. I sat alone on the bench Mom used to love, coffee in hand, watching the surface ripple with just enough breeze to make it feel alive. It had been weeks since the story broke wide open. The viral clip, the backlash, the long overdue exposure. The house didn't echo the same way anymore. Fewer phone calls. No more pacing the halls waiting for someone else to decide the truth. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt earned. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was choosing. Her voice still echoed in me, stand tall with a quiet back. That used to confuse me. Now it grounded me. The headlines had started to fade, but I knew the story still lived in people's minds. The emails didn't stop. Letters came, handwritten, some trembling in penmanship but strong in message. Women. Daughters. Caregivers. One letter simply said, "Your mother's story helped me walk away." Another was from a nurse who'd seen too many alones left behind. That one stung the deepest. A local community center reached out, asking if I'd speak on elder neglect. I didn't hesitate. Not for attention. Not to drag anyone's name. I showed up with notes filled with stories of who Mom was before they tried to rewrite her. I talked about how she loved puzzle nights. How she'd leave notes in my lunchbox well into high school. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. But every word I said came from a place of deep-rooted respect, and the room felt it. A week later, Merrick sent me a text, "We need to talk." We met at a diner off Route 5, old stools, cracked counters, coffee that tasted like memory. Mom used to bring us here as kids. We didn't order much. He looked older than I remembered, worn down in ways pride can't cover. It wasn't an apology. I didn't expect one. But he spoke. Said he'd been scared. Said he didn't know how to stop it once it started. I listened, but I didn't rescue him from his guilt. We both agreed on one thing, she deserved better. I nodded. She did. That was enough for now. The nonprofit launched 2 weeks later. Eloan's Grace. I picked the name because grace was the only thing she gave without condition. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure someone else's mother wouldn't be forgotten, overlooked, or written out. The first initiative was simple: scholarships for family caregivers, support networks, and a national campaign on elder dignity. For the first fundraiser, I donated the Porsche, the same one Merrick flaunted in the will. It sold fast. That felt good. When the press asked for interviews, I agreed, but only if the focus stayed on the cause. Not the scandal. Not the family feud. Just her legacy. Her laugh. Her love. Her strength. On a quiet Saturday, I drove out to her grave. No press. No fanfare. I carried a small stone etched with 3 words, seen. Heard. Loved. I knelt beside her, let the silence settle before I spoke. I told her everything. All the words I hadn't said when she needed to hear them. Told her I was sorry I stayed quiet so long. That I wasn't perfect, but I tried. As I stood, the wind kicked up, not sharp, just enough to move the trees. It felt like breath. I walked away not just from the grave, but from the need to be understood by those who never tried to understand her. I got in the car, rolled the windows down, let the cool air fill the space around me. The tank was full. The road was open. I didn't look back.